faithfully delivering value and interpreting great books worldwide. Hi, this is Sally from Talking Books. Today, we're diving into Newton's biography, focusing on 1642, a pivotal year for modern science. At the start of that year, the great scientist Galileo passed away. Then, in the harsh winter, another genius was born in Woolsthorpe, a tiny village in Lincolnshire, England. He's the greatest scientist in human history that we're covering today. In Michael H. Hart's ranking of the top 100 most influential people, Newton came in second, right after Muhammad. Tied for third was Jesus, highlighting Newton's massive impact on human history. So, why was Newton's influence so huge? Beyond his brilliant science, what hidden tales lie untold? This Newton biography will tackle all that, step by step. Author Michael White lectured at Oxford and is a top UK science writer and biographer. He's penned bios for giants like Galileo, Darwin, and Einstein, plus books on science history. Drawing from past biographies and tons of sources, White not only covers Newton's epic science, but also shows the real human Newton behind the legend. Okay, I'll split this into two parts, front, side, and back, to give you the full picture of Newton. In part one, we'll explore Newton's public side. I'll walk you through Newton's life milestones and his wins across different areas. Part two dives into Newton's personality side and hidden back-touching on his traits and the scientific feuds they sparked. And the back reveals two secret identities of his. Okay, first up, the Newton everyone knows, a hardworking scientist and manager his whole life. Born in a brutal 164-2 winter, Newton was premature, frail, under 3 pounds, yet he pulled through miraculously. His dad, Isaac Newton Sr., passed away sick 2 months before his birth. Mother Hannah gave him the same name as his father, also called Isaac Newton. When Newton was 3, his mother remarried to a parish minister named Smith, who lived about 10 kilometers away. Smith's family was well off, but there was a condition to this marriage. Little Newton couldn't accompany his mother, so she had to leave him with his grandparents for care. However, being separated from his mother when he needed her most led to him becoming eccentric, disliking social interactions, and spending most of his time quietly reading. Well, 8 years later, his stepfather Smith also passed away from illness, and his mother returned with 3 burdens. Newton's half-siblings. She returned to him, bringing along some property left by her late husband and hundreds of books, including many on philosophy and religion. Newton devoured these books. Although he loved reading, he initially had little interest in school because it often required rote memorization of classical literature and religious doctrines. But man, was he smart! He self-taught many concepts before the teacher even covered them in class. For example, in math, evidence shows that before entering Cambridge, Newton hadn't systematically studied it, yet he had already reached a high level through self-study. Not only was he intellectually brilliant, but Newton was also very skilled with his hands. As a teenager, he read a mysterious book called Nature and Public Welfare. Based on what he read, he designed and built many finely crafted gadgets, like windmills, kites, water wheels, sundials, paper lanterns, and so on. But Newton's mother, Hannah, didn't want the highly talented Newton to continue his studies. Having lost 2 husbands, she had to manage the farm work alone. Her greatest hope was for Newton to grow up quickly and become a diligent, law-abiding farmer to take over her duties. She even made Newton drop out of middle school for a year to help at home. But Newton's mind was never on farm work. When he herded sheep or pigs, he always got complaints, whether the animals nibbled on the grove, trampled neighbors' cornfields, or knocked down fences. Newton was fined for this and even had his name recorded in the local court's bad records. And luckily, Newton's middle school headmaster, Stokes, believed he was brilliant and cut out for studying. Thanks to his persistent persuasion, Newton's mother finally agreed to let him return to school, and Newton proved himself worthy. In late 1660, The 18-year-old Newton passed the entrance exam and entered Cambridge University, marking his first step into the scientific world. Today, Cambridge University is world-renowned. However, in the 1660s, it was far from an academic utopia. Back then, Cambridge was not only academically backward but also had poor public security. The town had many brothels and shady inns with frequent robberies, since many students were nobles or rich kids, and townsfolk made a living serving them. When Newton enrolled, he was at society's bottom and had to become a sizar. Sizar served wealthy students by doing chores like cleaning rooms and toilets to offset tuition costs. But Newton was relatively lucky. He was assigned as personal servant to Humphrey Babington. Babington traveled often, gave Newton light duties, and through his Trinity College position, got Newton into Cambridge's most prestigious college. Trinity College had strong religious influences. Students studied religion-related subjects plus language, philosophy, literature, arts, history, etc. Hearing this, sunlight ask. Newton studied language, philosophy, literature. Wasn't he just a standard liberal arts student? How did he cross over to science later? Here's why. 17th century modern science was budding. Terms like science or scientist didn't exist yet. Exploring natural laws was considered part of philosophy called natural philosophy, hence Newton's work, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. At Cambridge, Newton grew fascinated with natural philosophy, devouring classics by earlier thinkers. He meticulously studied works from Aristotle to Galileo and Descartes, decades before him. Besides, some Cambridge teachers greatly influenced Newton, like mathematician Barrow, the first Lucasian professor. The Lucasian chair was established by Cambridge MP Henry Lucas specifically for teaching natural sciences. Professor Barrow's mathematics greatly boosted Newton's math skills. In spring 1665, the 22-year-old Newton earned his bachelor's degree. Though he got second-class honors, he didn't care. The degree was just a springboard to stay at Cambridge for scientific exploration. But then, the Great Plague of London hit. This bubonic plague killed about 100,000 in London and surrounding areas, out of just 500,000 total residents. Cambridge was less affected but still impacted. So in late 1665, Newton returned to the countryside until early 1667, when he came back for his master's. This return changed his life. With many researchers dead from plague, 9 fellowship spots opened up. In 1667, with Babington's strong recommendation, Newton secured a fellowship. Normally, even with openings and recommendations, Newton's junior status would have made it tough. But a series of accidents created 4 more spots. One researcher got fired, 2 drunkenly fell downstairs and retired injured. And another froze to death after heavy drinking, letting Newton luckily fill the spot, becoming a Cambridge Fellow at 26. Though luck helped, opportunity favors the prepared. During the plague, his deep thinking on math and science in the countryside built explosive academic momentum. Take calculus. He started it then, the next year, 1668. He became a senior fellow and began his academic explosion, achieving 3 major breakthroughs. Newton's first breakthrough was calculus. He realized math was vital for studying nature, but basic arithmetic couldn't solve everything. For example, a rectangle's area is length times width, but curved shapes, much harder. The solution? Slice the curve into infinite tiny rectangles and sum their areas. That's calculus. Newton is considered one of the inventors of calculus. He started researching this method during the plague, applied it in his master's thesis, and later refined and named it fluxions, flowing streams. Also, due to his outstanding contributions in math, his teacher, mathematician Barrow, recommended Newton to take over the Lucasian professorship. This not only boosted Newton's academic reputation, but also gave him a stable, handsome income, finally settling his life down. Newton's second scientific achievement was his research on the nature of light. Newton was fascinated by light since childhood. As a kid, he seriously observed rainbows and made sundials. That's a tool for telling time by observing the shadows cast by sunlight. After taking the Lucasian professorship, the first course he taught was optics. What is the nature of light? Before Newton, opinions were all over the place. To study this, Newton designed various optical experiments outside his teaching duties. For example, he passed sunlight through a prism and saw white light split into 7 colors in order, called a spectrum, a first in human history. He realized this was the same principle as rainbows. Rainbows form when sunlight refracts through tiny water droplets in the air. Newton then passed this color spectrum through another prism and found it recombined into white light. So, Newton concluded light is made of particles, with different colored particles mixing to form white light. This is the particle theory of light. Newton became so obsessed with light research that he ignored his own health. He once did 2 experiments in just days that nearly blinded him.
The first was to observe the halo created by sunlight passing through glass.
From staring too long, the sun burned his retina, leaving spots in his vision that haunted him for life. The other experiment was even more startling. He pressed a sharp paper knife between his eyeball and the bone socket, pushing his eye forward to see colored halos from sunlight directly, an obsession that quickly paid off. In 1761, at the age of 29, Newton built a refined reflecting telescope, offering higher magnification and clearer images than the refracting telescopes used before. It was with this telescope that Newton was elected to the highest hall of British science. Newton was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society and published his first paper in their journal, Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, a new theory about light and colors. In this paper, Newton meticulously argued his new view that the white light we see in daily life.
For example, sunlight is made up of particles of 7 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and violet, thus solving nature's color mystery and causing a huge stir in academia.
However, what truly cemented Newton's place in history was his third achievement, proposing the law of universal gravitation and establishing classical mechanics. Newton's thoughts on force and motion had been brewing for a long time. The story of Newton getting hit by an apple is said to have happened during the London Plague when he returned to the countryside. But according to research, this story is likely made up. The earliest record of the apple story comes from French philosopher Voltaire, who was a huge fan of Newton. After Newton's death, Voltaire visited Newton's niece, Catherine. When they walked by an apple tree and discussed gravity, Voltaire probably linked the two together. Though whether Newton was actually hit by an apple remains unknown to us. However, he must have been constantly thinking about force and motion, but Newton didn't fully write down his ideas until after age 40, with astronomer Edmund Halley playing a crucial role. Newton didn't have many close friends in life, and Halley was one, being over a decade younger. Unlike Newton, he was a sociable person. While discussing celestial mechanics with Newton, Halley uncovered Newton's grand idea about the laws governing all motion. At first, Newton wasn't keen on publishing this content, but Halley saw how important this idea was for astronomy and science as a whole, and he kept pushing Newton to write it down. Later, Halley not only gave Newton lots of astronomical data for validation, but also actively helped get Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy published. The final publication of this book used mathematical language to describe the forces and motion of everything in the world. Overall, it's pretty deep, but the core can be summed up as the Newtonian motion we all know. Simply put, Newton's first law states that an object remains at rest or in uniform motion unless acted upon by an external force. The second law says an object's acceleration is proportional to the force applied and inversely proportional to its mass. Newton's third law declares that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction between interacting objects. Today, These three laws form the bedrock of physics and profoundly shaped human progress. Why do we say that?
First, they helped us understand our world, from celestial movements to objects on Earth.
Newton showed us why things move, how force operates, and crucially, gave humanity the foundation to reshape our world.
Since the 18th century, power has been key, from steam engines to generators to electric motors.
Each tech revolution harnessed different forces based on understanding them. Without exaggeration, Newton's theories propelled human history forward. After his scientific triumphs, Newton entered politics, showcasing remarkable talent there too. In 1696, at 54, Newton moved to London as a Parliament member and Master of the Royal Mint. He later became the Mint's warden. Late 17th century British coins were crude, easily counterfeited. People even clipped silver edges to make fake, clipped coins. This clipping chaos nearly crashed Britain's economy. Newton's top priority was recoining the currency. He might be Britain's most dedicated mint warden ever. He organized old coin recalls and adopted Europe's best minting tech for new coins, like engraving complex patterns on coin edges to prevent clipping. To ensure quality, Newton applied scientific rigor, inspecting every detail before dawn at the mint. He also enforced strict personnel rules, like banning workers from carrying anything in or out of factories, with thorough inspections.
To boost coin production, mints expanded from one in London to several across Britain, with Newton constantly traveling between them, ruthlessly cracking down on counterfeiters.
He'd recommend immediate execution upon discovery, causing outrage. Some even anonymously accused him of embezzlement. But crossing this genius scientist? Big mistake. Newton then turned detective, gathering hundreds of clues to unmask the anonymous accuser. Turned out the accuser was a counterfeiter himself. Ultimately, Newton's measures secured new currency circulation, fueling Britain's 18th century economic takeoff. In 1703, Newton became Royal Society president, purchasing their first permanent headquarters in central London. Crane Court ended the Society's era of rented offices and constant relocations. This boosted both the Society and British science. In 1705, Newton was knighted, revered by all. Now in his 60s, Newton revisited optics, publishing another masterpiece, Optics. He also revised and republished Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. After 80, he resigned from the Mint and Royal Society, moving to London's western suburbs. Unmarried, he spent his final years cared for by niece Catherine. Though mobility faded, his mental sharpness remained. Records show 80-something Newton kept all his teeth, attended Royal Society meetings with agile thinking. After a 1727 Society meeting, 84-year-old Newton fell ill and passed within weeks. A giant departed. Newton was buried at Westminster Abbey, mourned by nobles and commoners alike. Even political elites competed to carry his coffin. Back then, French Enlightenment thinker Voltaire was in London researching. He wrote in his diary, "I saw the British mourning Newton like they would a king who blessed his people." That concludes Newton's public side. Famous British poet Alexander Pope once wrote this verse praising Newton. "Nature and nature's laws lay hid in night. God said, 'Let Newton be,' and all was light." Newton is undoubtedly the brightest name in human scientific history. Born a farmer's son, through relentless effort, he became a world-changing scientist who unlocked nature's secrets. But to fully understand Newton, we must look beyond his public achievements. In part 2, I'll guide you through Newton's flawed personality traits and hidden identities. All right, that wraps up part 1 of Newton's biography. Check the show notes. Find them below the audio. See you next time.